Alright guys, and today I'm going to be answering one very simple question. Why do I play the Demonology Warlock in the Burning Crusade Classic? Now I do get asked this quite a lot on my live streams because it is a bit of a weird spec to play and not many people know a lot about it. My Twitch is in the description by the way, as always. So today I'm going to be answering all the questions that I get asked, why on earth would you play it? Is it good? Is it crap? And how do I actually make it work to the point where I can keep up on the DPS meters of all the other Warlocks? Now I should clarify that I am not a hardcore raider in any shape or form. I am way more of a casual player these days. I just do raiding for fun. And I also play this spec for fun, because that is the first reason why I play it. It is infinitely more fun to play than playing the typical Shadow Destruction spec, because you actually have a rotation other than just spamming Shadow Bolt and the occasional Immolate. Plus you have to manage your pet correctly so that he doesn't die all the time, which again adds to the gameplay. Overall I find it way more challenging, way more interesting and more rewarding to play Demonology. I'll tell you more about how I play the spec later, because the next big reason why I like playing Demonology is it is massively niche, weird and against the grain, and probably like it because I'm also a bit weird, and I also find it funny when people keep telling me to sacrifice my pet, like I've forgotten to sacrifice my pet, when actually I haven't. But you're probably thinking, is it good? Like, how do you make Demonology work? Why does no one play it? Well, it does actually do really good damage. Okay, the downside is that you have to keep your pet alive in order for you to take over the other Warlocks, or at least compete with the other Warlocks, and in practice that can be impossible on certain fights, near impossible anyway, because there are some workarounds that you can do, and obviously it's a little bit of RNG involved whether your pet's going to die or not, depending on whether he gets hit by certain mechanics, and you have to be way more on the ball and strategic and learn the mechanics of every boss fight in just a little bit more detail in order to keep your pet alive, in order to keep all the pet buffs. Technically, the spec that I use actually simulates more DPS on a target dummy than Shadow Destruction if the pet has 100% uptime on the boss or the target dummy. This is what I've read on the Warlock Discord anyway, and I'll explain why that actually makes sense, but obviously in practice, in the real world, in raiding, you can't always do that. You can't always keep your pet on the boss, because he will just get, well, she will get one-shot. So now let's take a little look at the talents. So you're probably thinking there's no way any other spec than Demonic Sacrifice on the Succubus for that extra 15% shadow damage is going to be beaten by any other spec. Well, what if I told you can actually get this 15% extra damage in Demonology spec without having to sacrifice your pet? So if you look closely at the Master Demonologist talent, with your Succubus or Incubus summoned, increases all damage caused by 10%. You may be thinking, well, that's not as good as 15%. Well, if you have Soul Link active, you get an extra 5%. So you've got that 15% bonus that you get in the Shadow Destruction spec. Now, on top of this, you have Demonic Knowledge, which increases your spell damage by amount equal to 12% of your total active pet's stamina plus intellect. And this is a big, meaty amount of spell power. Let me log into my character quickly to show you how much it's giving me in Phase 1/2 gear. So with a pet summoned, I have an extra 172 spell power, and this will increase when you give the pet stamina and kings to basically over 200, and as you get better and better gear, it just continues to keep going up. And obviously that is quite a lot of spell power. It's like having 2 spell power weapons equipped. Then we also get an extra 4% crit from Demonic Tactics. And this means we actually get an extra 9% crit purely from talents. And we can also, with this spec, pick up Ruin. You may be thinking, why have I not gone for the Felguard? Well, Ruin is infinitely going to be a bigger DPS increase than actually going for the Felguard. And it goes without saying, everyone knows that this is one of the biggest DPS increasing talent that a Warlock can get. The only issue with this is the Succubus doesn't have any avoidance, which is a big problem. Talk more about that later, but the Felguard does. It's easier to keep the Felguard alive, but without the Felguard and having Ruin instead, it is a bigger DPS increase. We also put 1 point into improved corruption to take it off well, to make sure the cast time is less than the global cooldown, because in the rotation we'll actually be using Corruption. And that's pretty much all there is to say about the spec, apart from the fact it is very important to pick up Demonic Embrace, Fell Intellect and Fell Stamina, because that will increase your pet's health and mana, which in turn increases your spell power. And then Improve Hell Funnel, fairly useful but not great. And then you have to have Fell Dominations for a free resummon on your pet, because in some situations you will have to resummon your pet, and obviously getting that off instantly is much better. And we also get Improved Shadow Ball, basically everything that a normal Shadow Destruction Warlock gets as well. And the pet will actually add, if the pet is on the boss 100% of the time, it adds an extra 7% extra damage on the recount, or details, whatever. But you also have to take Lash of Pain off, because that will consume Improved Shadow Bolt stacks, and that will be a DPS loss. This means that your pet doesn't actually use any mana, so it's utterly useless to have the talent mana feed. You're better off just having Demonic Resilience for 5% less damage taken on your pet. But obviously the big issue with using a Succubus is she is very squishy and she does die a lot, okay? Let me tell you how I at least make it kind of work. Okay, if you look at the 2-set bonus for tier 5, it will heal your pet for 15% of the damage you deal. There's actually a talent added at the top of the Demonology tree in Wrath of the Lich King, and it helps out a lot, because healers very rarely heal your pet unless a raid leader makes a point of it. Because you do actually deal a lot of damage with this build, it will be healed for a lot. Every Shadow Bolt roughly heals your pet for about 400 to 500 health, well in my gear anyway, and I don't have the best gear in the world. Soul Link also helps to reduce the damage slightly, so it's about 25% damage reduction on the pet. The issue though is big damage, okay? Some big damage can utterly just one-shot the pet if the pet isn't buffed by stamina. When the pet is buffed by stamina, it can normally survive most things, because it will have, you know, nearly 7k health. So yeah, you always have to remember to ask for buffs on your pet. And you need to keep your pet out of like big damaging abilities. Normally you can do this by just making her run back to you. On some fights you just simply cannot have your pet attacking the boss, you just have to have her on passive the whole time. And even when you do that, your damage is pretty good as well. You're just losing about 7% of your damage. You can also actually buff your pet with strength scrolls as well to increase her damage even more. You can use Health Funnel to keep her alive, but even talented, it doesn't really heal for that much. Plus it is a DPS loss to Health Funnel over Shadow Bolting. So you only really want to do it during downtime when you can actually deal any damage. But honestly, once you do practice playing in Demonology, you can keep your pet alive in a lot of raid fights. You may only be able to keep her on passive the whole time, but at least it gives you all of the great buffs that are active when your pet is summoned. And then on the fights where you can have your pet attacking the boss absolutely no problem because it isn't an anti-melee fight, then trust me, you will out-DPS all the other Warlocks. You definitely have a slightly more interesting rotation in Demonology spec. What you have to do is maintain Corruption, Immolate, and Curse of Agony or Curse of Doom on the target, depending on how long they are alive, and depending on what curse you've been assigned, obviously, and then you just kind of fill in with Shadow Balls. What's really nice about having 3 dots on the target, like Curse of Agony, is you will have, or she will have, 3 hots ticking away on her, which is great at keeping her alive. Another great thing is the Soul Link and Succubus combo increases all of your damage by 15%, and this means that it's always viable to use Immolate, which is obviously a fire spell, because you're not just buffing shadow damage, you are buffing all of your damage. Which means we actually do get to cast more than one spell. You know, how exciting is that? You can actually play Warlock with an actual rotation, and that is honestly the main reason why I put up with this spec and, you know, just work through it and put up with its disadvantages, is because I actually want to cast more than one spell. I actually want to think about playing my class. I'm not saying it's a drastically complicated spec or anything, but it's way better than just spamming one button. Another really cool part of playing Deep Demo is that the Fell Hunter, when he's summoned, will give you an extra 70 spell resistance in all of your schools. This means you can get 140 resistance to fire or shadow, you know, with a Shaman Totem or a Pally buff and a pre-shadow protection buff, without having any resistance gear equipped at all. Okay? This means on Mother Shiraz, I probably only need 2 pieces of shadow resistance gear, and I don't need to equip basically loads of bad shadow resistance gear, get myself under the spell cap. I can maintain the spell hit cap and have a lot of spell power equipped by just summoning the you know, the Fell Hunter. I will lose 10% damage, you know, from the Mass Demo buff. I mean, I haven't really tested this much, but I feel like because I won't have to equip loads of shadow resistance gear without any stats on it, I'm going to stay above the hit cap, and I probably will do fairly decent damage compared to the other Warlocks who are probably going to be decked out in like half and half shadow resistance gear and their normal gear. It also makes Warlock tanking on Lurker and KT much easier because you get that extra fire resistance. You get 140 without equipping any gear, so you only have to equip a couple of pieces, which means you can stay above the hit cap, which is better for aggro generation. You've also got Souling for the 20% damage reduction, which again, it just means you don't have to stack loads of fire resistance gear and you can generate aggro better because you have higher spell power and you deal more damage. And that is the reason why I play Demonology Warlock, guys. Mainly because it's fun, but I encourage you guys to check it out because, like I said, it is fun to play and it isn't exactly detrimentally worse than playing a typical Destruction Warlock. It's much harder and more challenging to play, obviously because it's harder to pull off because you have to keep your pet alive, but I honestly find that challenge, you know, just more fun and interesting to play. So if you want to check out me playing Demonology Warlock, obviously again my Twitch is in the description down below. I am going to be clearing tier 6 raids on my Demonology Warlock actually tomorrow and in the coming weeks. I normally raid Sunday and Tuesday. So yeah, anyway, my name is MetaGoblin. To my next video, ciao.